In today's video, I'm really going to be talking about the RBA announcement exclusively. Hello and welcome to another acysecurities Hot Topics video. My name is Alistair Schultz and I'm going to be your host through today's trading journey. As I mentioned before, I am going to be talking about the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia. They're expected to be delivering some monetary policy meeting minutes and of course a couple of our announcements out today. So of those, what do I see or anticipate happening? The first thing to make note of is that we've already heard about this idea that they're likely going to be cutting the interest rate. There are likely going to be cuts to more than just the overnight cash rate being at 0.25% down to 0.1%, a 15 basis point drop. Now, of course, we're also looking at other aspects here. Now, whilst they might be cutting the interest rate, and usually seeing something get this low in Australia would usually be cause for concern or at least a very, very big event. Today, however, it is not. It is not the main event as far as I'm concerned. A drop down in the interest rate on its own doesn't really provide too much in terms of ways for the economy. What it does, and to give it an example, if we saw a $300,000 mortgage, it might mean that those people having the mortgage would maybe save $250 per annum. So that doesn't really help with the consumer spending that they're trying to target. It's pretty clear the RBA, in their latest language, has been about trying to promote jobs. Now, what is one that is going to impact that figure? The exchange settlements interest rate. If you will, the long-term savings account for the big banks. Now, what this rate is at current is 0.1%, and there is anticipation, or at least some level of expectation, is going to be dropped down to 0.05 or 0.01%, which is obviously a very big difference. Now, if it does happen this way, then that means that there's going to be more incentives for banks to deploy their money out, as opposed to keeping it and holding on to that cash in effectively what's considered a long-term savings interest box. Now, if they do that, it means that we're probably going to get higher grades of consumer spending. It means they're more inclined to give that money out so that they can actually help people. Now, moving on from that, we're also probably going to see some changes to the term lending figures. Right now, 0.25%, we might see it drop down to 0.1% as well. And we're also going to be seeing them probably reduce what they have in terms of yield controls for the 3-year bonds. The big one, though, that I'm really going to be focusing on today is on the 5 to 10-year bonds. I'm interested to see if they're going to start doing asset purchase programs around those or quantitative easing. So far, there is some guesstimates in the works that this could happen, and it could be to the tune of about $100 billion. Now, the big questions that come out of that is, what's the timeline? Is this going to be a one-off $100 billion mark, or is it going to be gradual over a year or 2 or 3? And that's really where I'm going to be focusing my attention today, because obviously, if we do start seeing 5 and 10-year bonds purchased, we're going to get a decline in the Australian dollar's value, and therefore we may even get more benefit from that. Now, whilst we get a decline in the Australian dollar, we will likely see that exports, domestic exports, will see an improvement in conditions, because then with less value in the Aussie dollar, it makes them more interest, and it makes it a little bit cheaper for some internationals to actually invest in the Australian economy. So that will be the first aspects that I'm really going to be focusing on. Now, whilst all of these might happen, and there are significantly going to be cuts all round, it's going to be a matter of picking out the ones that are going to have the most impact towards the Australian economy as to where we actually see the money move around. Now, looking at some extra info for you today, here in Australia it is Melbourne Cup Day. And whilst Melbourne Cup Day is going ahead a little bit later on this afternoon, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of those out there wanting to have a bit of a punt on it, we also have a bit of a race today, the ACY Sprint, held in New South Wales at Randwick. It's going to be race number 8, and it will be starting at 5:35 p.m. this evening. Now, if you haven't put your bets in for the Melbourne Cup, it's a good opportunity to have a bit of a look and have something a little bit different to what we usually look at when it comes to our picks for stocks, futures, options, commodities, and of course FX markets. Now, looking at the news ahead of today, we do have a bank holiday in Japan. Naturally, the big ticket items are the Australian cash rate and their rate statement. They are going to be the big ones. They are the ones that we're going to be hearing a lot of news in the Asian session about. And obviously, much later in the evening in the US session, we will be seeing the start or the commencement of the US presidential election. But don't expect results tonight. We will likely see some when it gets closer to the voting end tomorrow. And we will likely see something perhaps tomorrow, perhaps the day after, in terms of who was actually won. Now, that's all I have for you today. Keep an eye on what's going on your charts. Keep an eye on the horses And good luck if you are racing and punting on them today. And of course, feel free to get in contact with me about anything covered today at any of my socials. And of course, you can always send me an email at talktoal@acy.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this video so you can get more great content from me and ACY Securities in the future. Have a great trading day ahead.